Yes, sir.
Neha, sir is ready. So I think we have a good number of attendees also, so we can start the proceedings.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very good, sir. How are you? Thank you very much. I know I've been pressing you very hard. You have very little time, but really grateful to you for giving us this time, sir.
No, it's always a pleasure to
Forward,
talk
sir.
to students and to try to
I know, sir. I know.
teach whatever I have learned so far.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Neha, please start.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
No mistake is more common and more factious than appealing to logic in cases which are beyond her jurisdiction. Good afternoon, one and all present. The system for delivering criminal justice in our society is composite of many complex relationships. These relationships constitute a social system of cause and effect. Criminal justice system can function fully well if there will be a proper coordination between all components. But there exists interface conflict between these components. So there is dire need of effective implementation of laws and proper coordination between all the components of criminal justice system. It is equally important when integrity and credibility of the investigation is discernible, the trust, faith, and confidence of the common man in the judicial process will resonate. Ladies and gentlemen, I, Neha Mishra, welcome you all on behalf of Amity Law School in this session titled Criminal Justice System Conflict of Jurisdiction. The task of introducing our guest is bestowed on me. We have a legal luminary with us today who actually needs no introduction. And in the past few days, we have all seen him regularly on our TV screens. Yes, I'm talking about none other than Mr. Vikas Singh Sir, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, former Additional Solicitor General of India, and former President, Supreme Court Bar Association, who has spared his precious time to share with the students his prowess in the field of law and acquaint them with practical application of law. Mr. Vikas Singh Sir is a graduate in BSc Chemistry Honours from Patna Science College. He did his LLB from Delhi University in 1983 and was enrolled as an advocate in the year 1990. Since then, Sir is actively practicing law and has appeared and argued before the Supreme Court of India, various high courts, tribunals, commissions, and varied other forums. Mr. Vikas Singh Sir has handled constitutional, administrative, corporate, criminal, arbitration, and other varied matters. He is a member of Supreme Court Bar Association and Delhi High Court Bar Association. He is appointed as the Additional Solicitor General of India from 2005 to 2008 and defended Union of India, including its departments and PSUs in several matters before various legal forums. Mr. Singh has fearlessly taken stand before the Supreme Court of India regarding separation of powers and has also impressed the courts as and when they encroached upon the executive domain. His stand was appreciated by Sri A.G. Nurani in the recent article on Outlook. Sir was also appointed as a special prosecutor by the government of NCT of Delhi in the famous Abu Salem case. Sir has also appeared several times on the program of NDTV, We the People, as one of the panelists with Madam Barkha Dutt. May I now request Mr. Vikas Singh Sir to address the viewer, please. Sir.
Your mic is
Sir,
muted,
please,
sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, your mic is muted. No, not yet. Mic unmute. Ma'am, mic unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
First of all, I'd like to thank Major General Praveen ji for calling me on this show, because it's always a pleasure to be with students of law and try to share my experience and my knowledge in the field, because I feel that one responsibility for any person who has done anything in law is to also share his knowledge and ensure that this by this process the younger generation also is able to gain the insight of whatever I have achieved or whatever I have been able to gain so far in this profession. This is a very interesting topic for about one reason, that when I started practice in 1990, I did not like to do criminal law. It was just abhorrent that why should I be meeting criminals? Why should I be, looking at cases of crime? So I used to just avoid. In fact, when the reports, the SEC reports used to come, I used to skip all those judgments which were dealing with criminal law, and I used to read only the ones relating to civil law, corporate law, constitutional law. But for about 7-8 years, I could do this. And there were many occasions where, people known to me with some criminal cases came, and I didn't do them. I sent them to somebody else. And many a times when I came to know that the case was mishandled, I felt bad. I said I should have done that case myself. And that is what prompted me a little later in the profession to start doing criminal law. So in that sense, this is not one of my original favorite subjects, but now it is definitely a favorite subject of mine. And of late I've been doing, even as additional Solicitor General, I did some very big cases in criminal law, in NDPS, in PMLA, and of course now I do them regularly. This issue of conflict of jurisdiction is a very interesting issue, because when I was doing this case, actually the whole thing started when the father of Sushant Singh Rajput met me somewhere in the middle of July. And he was very upset that the Mumbai police is not taking the case in the right direction. And the family has given a particular direction to the Mumbai police, and they are not following that direction. They are going all over. They are doing an inquest proceeding. They have not even registered an FIR. So what are the options available to us? Of course, one option was to register an FIR with the Mumbai police. But the family was apprehensive because the Mumbai police, if the way it was conducting the case so far, if an FIR had been registered, the investigation is always with the police. So if they don't want to investigate something, or if they want to cover up something, there is no way by which a private person can ensure that the investigation be done properly or diligently. So that option was ruled out. The other option then I could suggest them was that there could be an FIR in Patna, because the father of Sushant Singh Rajput lives in Patna, and accordingly, if the Patna police were to start the investigation, then at least we could ensure that the investigation is done in the right direction. And of course, criminal law justice as it works, it is the job of the prosecution to prove the guilt. So only if they had been able to prove the guilt, any prosecution could take place. But at least the wheels of the criminal justice system could be started by getting an FIR registered. So we got the FIR registered in Patna, and as luck would have it, or as bad luck would have it, the Patna police was not given cooperation by the Mumbai police, and the city SP Patna was kept in quarantine. It is at that stage I advised the family that probably letting the investigation be done by Patna will not help us, because it will delay the investigation quite indefinitely. And so the Chief Minister had offered to refer it to the CBI. So we said, all right, let it go to the CBI. At least that problem of quarantining a CBI officer will not arise, because there is a proper CBI office in Mumbai also. And the Mumbai office of the CBI can take over, or even if the CBI special team is constituted anywhere, even that will not have any problem, and the investigation at least can continue in right earnest. So that is how this whole case started factually. But when when the matter was pending in Supreme Court, it so happened that there were so many channels who were wanting to discuss this Patna FIR, and it had in fact become a joke The other day I went to play tennis in the Delhi Gymkhana Club, and a former additional director of CBI was on the tennis court, and my turn was to come after he was to go out to the court, and he jokingly said, "Arey, court jaldi chhod do, nahi to Vikas Patna mein FIR kara dega." So that is how this had become some kind of a joke that this Patna FIR is completely bogus, and you know, commentators after commentators, public prosecutors, former DGP polices came on show and said that Patna had no jurisdiction. Patna had to register a zero FIR and transfer that FIR to Mumbai, and that is the only course available to Patna. Patna could not have started investigating the matter. So I'm going to explain how Patna can have jurisdiction in a case like this, and why the Supreme Court decided in my favor by holding that Patna FIR was correctly registered, and the Patna police had the right to investigate this matter also. So for that purpose, we'll have to just look at the CRPC. There are some provisions of the CRPC. Unfortunately, people don't read those provisions, and that is why probably judgment came in my favor, because people who were arguing on TV channels were not, had not probably devoted sufficient time in reading the CRPC or in reading the judgments which have been already rendered by the Supreme Court in regard to these provisions. So if you see the CRPC, before that I'll explain what is a zero FIR, because there is a concept of zero FIR, and everybody was saying, very famous public prosecutors were saying, even Ujjwal Nikam came on the show one day with me, and he also said, no, Patna could only register a zero FIR, they could not have registered any FIR. Zero FIR is where a complainant says that I am having difficulty in registering the FIR where the crime has been committed for XYZ reason. Either the accused is very powerful or his influence is such that the police station in that area will not register the FIR. So the complainant himself or herself says to a police station that this police station has no jurisdiction. This case is committed entirely in that X area, but X area FIR can't be registered for, again, good reasons, because I apprehend that it will not be registered. So I just want that this FIR be registered because it discloses a commission of a cognizable offense, and then the FIR be transferred to the police station where the investigation should take place. And the classic case, if you all will remember, is the case of Asaram Bapu, that girl who was the victim of whatever Asaram Bapu did. Unfortunately, Asaram Bapu was also my client, so I'm only referring to whatever are on records, because I have, as a lawyer for him, I have of course a different story to say, but I'm only going by whatever is on record. So the girl who was the victim was a person who belonged to UP. The incident, whatever happened in Rajasthan, and she was passing through Delhi, and she went to a police station in Delhi and got a zero FIR registered. And she said that it is not possible for this FIR to be registered in Rajasthan because he is very powerful. And I have got the courage here to get this FIR registered. And whatever she said disclosed the commission of a cognizable offense. So the FIR was registered in Delhi and transferred to Rajasthan. So that is what a zero FIR is according to me. Any FIR where the complainant feels that that place has jurisdiction, where he is asking the FIR to be registered, the police is under a compulsion to register the FIR and start investigation. So it's not only register an FIR. That zero FIR will be transferred to the place because the complainant himself or herself says that this place has no jurisdiction. I'm only getting it registered here because of some good reasons. It is only in those cases that the police can shut its mind and say that, look here, this is not a case where I can't investigate, it will go to the other police station. In every other case where the complainant feels that there is a jurisdiction to the concerned police station, the police station has to register a FIR and start investigation. And if you see the CRPC, some sections are very important. So for instance, the FIR is registered under 154, and under 156 is the power of investigation of a cognizable offense. 155 deals with the non-cognizable offense where you have to go through a magistrate, and 156 deals with a cognizable offense. Under 156(1), it very clearly says that police will investigate any case registered within its jurisdiction. And 2 says that the issue of jurisdiction cannot be raised at this stage for the purpose of investigating the matter. I'm not quoting the section, but I'm only saying it in my own words, what 156(2) means. So the issue of jurisdiction can't be a basis for the police to not start the investigation. And that is what the Supreme Court has held in several judgments, including Lalita Kumari, that whenever the commission of a cognizable offense is disclosed, the police has no discretion but to register an FIR. And after registration of the FIR, the police have to start the investigation. Now, as far as places where the cases will be ultimately tried is determined under section 177, 178 and 179 of the CRPC. 177, as the usual section goes, says that it will be registered at the place where the crime has been committed. 178 gives a small sort of window for going to the main place where the crime has been committed and to cover places where part of cause of action has also arisen. So that is 178. And 179 is that where the consequences of a crime ensue, even there the investigation and the trial can continue. So these 3 sections very clearly provide that it is not only where the crime is committed, but also where the part of cause of action has arisen or where the consequences ensue. My advice to the family of Sushant Singh Rajput was basically by a reading of 178 and 179. 177, as everybody used to say rightly, the jurisdiction would be only Mumbai because the death has happened there and most of the transactions have happened there. So 177 would be the normal place of jurisdiction. But 178 jurisdiction also will lie in this case because part of cause of action had arisen here. Now, how does part of cause of action arise in Patna in the case of death of Sushant Singh Rajput? Part of cause of action arises because the father used to live in Patna, and the whole case in the FIR was that the accused, number 1, ensured that the victim, that is Sushant Singh Rajput, is kept away from all the family members, kept away from talking to his family. And slowly his mind was taken control of, and he was also made to feel that there is something wrong with his mind, and accordingly some treatments were started, and all this was done behind the back of the family. Now, if the family had access to Sushant Singh Rajput, especially the father, who was not allowed to talk, whenever he used to call on some pretext or the other, he was not connected, and the call was never allowed to go through. And in fact, when he said that I want to come, even that was not the manager did not send in the tickets, etc. And when he asked Riya pointedly that what has happened to my son, why are you not telling me, she never told him anything. So if that communication channel had been alive, and if he had known what all treatment was being done to him behind his back and without his knowledge and without his consent, then probably he could have saved the life of Sushant Singh Rajput. So if that communication channel had remained alive, he could have played a very instrumental role in ensuring that Sushant Singh Rajput is alive. And we were presuming at that point of time that it was suicide only. Today, of course, story, what is emerging is a little different. But I'm going on what the FIR said and what was the allegation in the FIR. So the allegation, as per the allegation, the accused number 1 ensured that the victim is cut off from the family, and because the victim is cut off from the family, the whatever counseling that could have taken place from the family, or whatever treatment that the family could have got done, or whatever family could have done to ensure that the way he's being treated, ill-treated rather, stops, and the family could then ensure that he remains alive. So that definitely was part of the cause of action, and that, according to 178, was a place where a jurisdiction would lie for the purpose of criminal courts for inquiries and trials under Chapter 13. The other point that we took in the FIR, I mean, the way FIR was drafted was to make jurisdiction in Patna was the consequence. So one of the allegation was criminal breach of trust. Now, if Sushant Singh, whatever he earned and whatever remains after his death, that all will have to be accounted for to the father, because he's the senior most legal heir, I would say, because there is no class 1 legal heir. Amongst the class 2, it goes by seniority. So he was the senior most legal heir, and because Sushant was not married, he didn't have any children. So he was the legal heir where the property would have to be accounted for. So under 179, and also, and it is accepted by the Supreme Court in the judgment, that the father has always the expectation, especially in Bihar, that the son will light his funeral pyre. And Sushant was the only son. So even that expectation of a father, or the consequence of his son not being there to light his pyre anymore, was the other consequence that happened because of this untimely death of Sushant Singh Rajput. So on 178 and 179, it was our case that Patna had jurisdiction, and that is what the Supreme Court ruled in our favor. Now, while I'm on 179, there is another section which is again very important, which is 181. 181 talks of place of trial in case of certain offences. And if you see 181.4, very clearly, and that is what Supreme Court has held in our case, 181.4 says, and this is important, I'll read this section, any offence of criminal misappropriation or criminal breach of trust may be inquired into or tried by a court within whose local jurisdiction the offence was committed, or any part of the property which is the subject matter to the offence was received or retained, or was required to be returned or accounted for by the accused person. So in this case, if there is an allegation of criminal breach of trust on Ria for having, sort of squandered his money, or utilized his money contrary to his free will, then clearly that money was to be accounted for in Patna, and 181.4 very clearly says that that court will have jurisdiction to try that case as well. So these are the sections on which the whole case was set up. And I would like to refer to some judgments which are, very relevant on this. Firstly, on the question of a police officer, his right cannot be questioned in the light of 156.2. That is Satwinder Kaur 99-8 SCC 728. And Rasik Lal Dalpat Thakkar versus Gujarat 2010 1 SCC page 1. Now both these judgments very clearly say that once the FIR is registered, the question of whether the police officer had jurisdiction to investigate that matter or not is not which can be gone into at the stage of investigation. And whether that place will have the right to try the matter or not is an issue which has to be considered only at the post-cognizance stage. So in the case of Satwinder Kaur, only one paragraph I'll read. The operative part is from para 10 to 15. It is true that territorial jurisdiction also is prescribed under subsection 1 to the extent that officer can investigate any cognizable case which a court having jurisdiction over local area within the limits of such police station would have power to inquire into and try under the provisions of Chapter 13. However, subsection 2 makes the position clear by providing that no proceeding of a police officer in any such case shall at any stage be called in question on the ground that the case was one which such officer was not empowered to investigate. And then it goes on to say in the same, further, if the investigating officer arrives at the conclusion that the crime was not committed within the territorial jurisdiction of the police station, the FIR can be forwarded to the police station having jurisdiction over the case, so which is that zero FIR. But this would not mean that in a case which requires investigation, the police officer can refuse to record the FIR and or investigate it. So that power of the police to investigate. So if it is if on the face of it, if as per the version of the complainant himself or herself, there is nothing done happening in that area, or there is no semblance of jurisdiction in that area, then it can be transferred to the concerned police station for investigation. But in all other cases, where there is a semblance of jurisdiction or where the complainant feels that the police station has jurisdiction, in all those cases, the police has no authority to not investigate the matter or to not register the FIR, and the FIR has to be registered, the investigation has to start. I personally feel that this is very salutary, and especially in the in a country like ours, where there is a lot of cross migration from one state to the other, and especially people from the poorer states going to these richer states or bigger cities in the hope of finding vocation. Just imagine the plight of a small person from Orissa going from a small town and working in Delhi or Mumbai in a large city, and meeting something like this as part of his fate. Do you expect that small man, his father or mother, to go all the way to Mumbai and Delhi and get a case registered and get justice for their son? Why should not the state machinery be used in this case if he has a case of cognizable offense made out, and on the basis of which he registers that case at his own native place? Why can't the police use the state machinery and at the state expense the investigation be done and the culprits be brought to book and made to face trial? So it is in a welfare state like ours to insist that every time a crime is committed, the place where the consequences ensue, especially when the CRPC itself provides so, or part of cause of action has arisen, in those cases also, you will be forced to go to that place only and say, I can understand somebody having a choice. So for instance, if Sushant Singh's father had been residing in Mumbai, and if supposing he had no loss of faith in the Mumbai police, he would have got it registered in Mumbai. So it's not as if in every case this kind of a thing will happen. It's only in those extreme cases where somebody resides very far off and suffers the consequence as well as part of cause of action has arisen, that in those cases only this will happen. Now the other issue which was raised before the Supreme Court was that issue of territorial jurisdiction cannot be raised till the cognizance happens. It is only at the post-cognizance stage, and for that the judgment is Thrissur Chemicals Industry, 1999, 8 SCC 686. Relevant paras are paras 11 to 14. And this judgment goes on to say that the right of any magistrate to take cognizance is unfettered, even if it is not within his territorial jurisdiction. And that's what I wanted to emphasize. And it says, Para 12, Section 193 imposes a restriction on the Court of Session to take cognizance of any offence as a court of original jurisdiction. But any magistrate of first class has the power to take cognizance of any offence, no matter that the offence was committed within his jurisdiction or not. This is the Supreme Court language exactly. Then again in Para 13, therefore, when there is nothing in Chapter 14 of the Code to impair the power of judicial magistrate of first class taking cognizance of the offence on the strength of any territorial reason, it is impermissible to deprive such magistrate of the power to take cognizance of an offence. Of course, in certain special enactments, special provisions are incorporated for restricting the power of taking cognizance of offence falling under such other acts. But such provisions are protected by non-obstante clause, In any way, that is a different matter. The jurisdictional aspect becomes relevant only when the question of inquiry or trial arises. It is therefore a fallacious thinking that only a magistrate having jurisdiction to try the case has the power to take cognizance of the offence. If he is a magistrate of first class, his power to take cognizance of the offence is not impaired by territorial restrictions. After taking cognizance, he may have to decide as to the court which has jurisdiction to inquire into or try the offence, and that situation would reach only during post-cognizance stage and not earlier. So I started off by the police investigation, and the Supreme Court says even till the stage of cognizance, as long as the cognizance is to be taken by a magistrate of first class, up to a magistrate of first class, that cognizance also can be taken notwithstanding whether the crime is committed within his territorial jurisdiction or not. And it is only later when the inquiry or trial starts that he has to decide whether he will try the case himself or he will transfer it to the jurisdiction where this particular crime, according to him, was committed. So this is extending not only for the investigation part, but also for taking cognizance. Now, another very interesting case which I cited and which was again approved with approval, the Supreme Court decided this case in our favor, was the case of Lee Kun-hee. He was the president of Samsung Corporation, South Korea, and it was versus state of UP. This is 2012 3 SCC 132. Now, this is a very interesting case. In this case, what had happened was that there was a supplier in Ghaziabad who had supplied to some corporation by the name of Impex, and Impex was to supply further to Samsung, and the entire transfer to Samsung was taken outside India. So there was no privity of contract between the complainant and Samsung. Samsung was a third party buyer from the person to whom this the complainant was selling to. When the goods reached and the money did not come, the FIR was registered in the complaint case was registered in Ghaziabad. And one of the issues that arose before the Supreme Court was that how could the complaint be registered in Ghaziabad when no part of the cause of action had arisen at Ghaziabad, because neither was Samsung there, nor was there any privity of contract, and the entire, if at all, crime that had taken place outside the jurisdiction of this country, not only Ghaziabad, but outside the jurisdiction of the country. Supreme Court using 181.4, as I just mentioned a little while earlier, I read 181.4 also for that reason, which is dealing with criminal breach of trust. Supreme Court using 181.4 read with 179 said very clearly in this case, in paragraphs 18 onwards, the allegation made by them was very clearly, it is submitted that neither the criminal complaint nor the pre-submitting evidence recorded under 200 of the CRPC attributes any act of omission commission within the territorial jurisdiction of India to any of the 5 appellants. So that was Samsung, president of Samsung Corporation, etc. Then para 20, it was asserted that even according to the amendments made in the complaint, the goods were supplied to Sky Impex, not to Samsung, and not to any one or more of the appellants herein. And still the Supreme Court, using 181 and 179, said very clearly in paragraph 32, on the question of jurisdiction, based on factual position indicated above, reference may be made to 179 of the CRPC, which is reproduced hereunder. When any act is an offence by reason of anything which has been done or of a consequence which has ensued, the offence may be inquired into or tried by a court within whose local jurisdiction such thing has been done or such consequence has ensued. In section 179, aforesaid 2 phrases need to be noticed. Firstly, anything which has been done with reference to the offence, and secondly, consequence which has ensued, also with reference to the offence. Both the aforesaid phrases substantially enlarge and magnify the scope of jurisdiction contemplated under section 179 aforesaid, so as to extend the same over areas contemplated by the two phrases. So very clearly using 179 and then 181.4 also, Supreme Court says that since 181.4 is a special section made out for criminal breach of trust, and if the money was to be accounted for in a particular place, then that place also will have jurisdiction. And the other case, of course, is of a matrimonial matter, Rupali Devi versus State of UP, 2019, 5 SCC 384, paragraphs 4, 8, and 15. Here what had happened was that the lady who was suffering harassment from the husband and his family, the specific question posed was whether a woman forced to leave her matrimonial home on account of acts and conduct that constitute cruelty can initiate and access the legal process within the jurisdiction of the courts where she is forced to take shelter with the parents or other family members. So clearly nothing has happened there where she is living with the family. Everything has happened at the matrimonial home, which is some other place. And Supreme Court in this case very categorically held that yes, that will be a place where the consequences have ensued in paragraph 8 very clearly. Thus, if an offense is committed partly in one place and partly in another, or if the offense is continuing offense, or where the consequences of a criminal act result in an offense being committed at another place, the exception to the ordinary rule will be attracted, and the courts within whose jurisdiction the criminal act is committed will cease to have exclusive jurisdiction and try the offense. So in this case also the Supreme Court said that where the woman has started residing with her parents, although nothing has actually happened there, will also have jurisdiction, and the case was rightly registered there. Now, another very interesting question arises in issue of jurisdiction is with regard to Section 6 of the Special Police Establishment Act. So as you all know, or should know, that under the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, under which the CBI is constituted, the CBI can register a case as far as the public sector is concerned, or offices of the Government of India are concerned in any place in India. That jurisdiction is unfettered. But if they have to register a normal case in any state, then there should be a consent from that particular state to register the FIR. Now, question arose before the Delhi High Court in the case of Anand Agarwal versus Union of India, 2018, SCC online 11713. The question arose that if one state has given consent where the FIR has been registered, can the CBI go to other states as well, which state may not have consented for the CBI? So as you know, some states, like for instance, today Andhra Pradesh has withdrawn the consent. So there is no general consent to Andhra Pradesh. But if an FIR is registered in Delhi, can the CBI go to Andhra Pradesh also while investigating that offense? So the High Court, Delhi High Court has taken the view that yes, the CBI need not take consent for every state. If the state where the FIR was registered has given consent, then all other states where the CBI may have to go while investigating that case can be done even if that particular state has not given consent. And another case on this point is of Kamal Tanuj versus State of Bihar. It's a case of an IAS officer in Bihar. And he, according to him, unfortunately, I had argued his matter, but I could not succeed. And but the law as it stands today, even though I will not agree with that law, as it stands today, is that Bihar had not given consent for any offense to be registered co-op officers working in the state of Bihar. So there was a general consent with a proviso. And when CBI registered this case, the Bihar state refused to give that consent. And Kamal Tanuj wanted to argue that because consent is not there, this case could not be investigated and the FIR needs to be quashed. But the Supreme Court again in this case held that since the FIR was registered in Delhi, where there is a consent, so that FIR, that registered FIR is good enough for the CBI to go to Bihar as well and investigate this matter. And accordingly, the jurisdiction issue was resolved by saying that every state need not give consent in the case of this kind where there are crime committed in 2 or 3 states. So, of course, in the case of Kamal Tanuj, they have given us, the Supreme Court has given us a small leeway that if we are able to establish at the cognizance stage that nothing has happened in Delhi, then that we can argue before the judge, and then in that case, probably the FIR registered in Delhi itself may not be held to be proper. But otherwise, it was held that one consent from one state should be good enough for a consent for investigating this matter in another state. So these are the broad issues which arise for in this kind of consent, in this case, conflict of jurisdiction in criminal matters. And I feel that if there are any questions, I would not mind doing a 10-15 minute question answer on this so that we wrap up by 4.
Thank you, sir, for your this enlightening speech, sir. And I believe that all viewers get benefited by your deliberation and the knowledge which you have bestowed on us from your vast reservoir. The house is open for question. I request all the attendees, please type your questions in Q&A section.
Pranshul, Neha, I think there are 2-3 questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
They can be asked. Sir,
Yes, sir.
what I feel, some of the participants are very keen to inquire about the facts of the case which you are presently handling. Which I was thinking that it is better avoided, but still, sir, if you feel, if certain question, if you permit, then we can. Otherwise, I was of the view that if questions relating to law are asked, that would be much better.
I think that will be better because
Yes,
facts
sir.
are, in any case, these are mostly matters of investigation.
Yes.
And even if I know something, I can't share them with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one question I want to put, the question is asked by Srishti Jaswal, and she wants to know that is there any provision for taking action if the state police did not cooperate with another state police department? Then do we have any provision or any action can be taken against them?
Well, of course, the state police can approach the constitutional court and get an appropriate direction wherever this kind of a thing happens. But in my case, in Sushant Singh Rajput, we didn't think of following that line because that would have also further delayed the whole thing. But that relief definitely can be obtained. And the jurisdictional high court, so for instance, in this case, if the Patna police had wanted, they could have gone to the Bombay High Court and got an appropriate direction from the Bombay High Court, and the Bombay High Court could have directed the local police. And definitely the police then would be bound to render all assistance. But as you know, a judicial hearing takes so much of time, and by the time that decision would have come, more evidence would have been lost, so that route was not feasible in our case.
So we have another question from one of our faculty, Ma'am Monica Yadav, and she's asking, do you think media interference in high-profile cases hampers the investigation and also influences the investigating agencies?
Well, I definitely feel that too much of media is not good for any criminal trial. And if you will ask me my frank opinion, the sufferers are both. The accused is also a sufferer because of the media trial. Many a times the accused is not able to get justice. And in my case, I feel that even the complainant is a sufferer because what has been happening in this country in the last 60-70 days is, witnesses are being brought on the channels and questions being asked on the channel, and witnesses being saying what happened on the channel. Now all that will expose that witness to firstly manipulation, firstly coercion, Some also some important ones may also get eliminated. So all that will ultimately hamper the trial as far as the complainant is concerned. So both ways but unfortunately in this case, because the Mumbai police was going in a completely sort of wayward direction and was not taking any steps which could be said to be a logical step in a case, in a death of this kind. Probably media to start with was essential, but thereafter, once the case has actually been entrusted to an investigating agency, which is actually doing a proper job, thereafter I feel media should restrain itself and let the investigating agencies. And that is where you must have seen for the last 10 days, I have refused to come on media because now it is the investigation which is going on. And at this stage, it is not proper for anybody to comment on what is happening in the investigation.
So the next question is from Vanshika Kumar, and he's asking, is there a provision? Okay, he's asking about the missing of the time of death from postmortem report, and can we hold police liable for the same when the time of death is missing?
So police will not be that much liable, but the doctors who have done the postmortem will definitely be liable. Police also will be liable to the extent of not asking the doctors on the spot that why did you not give the time of death in the postmortem report. So definitely police partially and doctors fully will be responsible for this very glaring lapse in the postmortem report.
So I also have one question. What is the objective of this section 6 which you have told us, and why this provision of prior consent of states is inserted in that section, sir? What is the objective behind this, sir?
So the objective is very laudable. As you know, we are a federal structure. Our constitution is a federal structure. And police is normally policed is in list 2. So normal policing is all part of state subject. So only in those cases where the state allows the police to come in, it is only in those cases. So just to maintain the proper federal structure of our polity, only in those cases where the state permits the CBI to come in are the cases where the matters can be referred to the CBI. So in cases where the state does not permit, because it is purely a state subject, that is why that consent of the state is necessary.
Thank you, sir. I'll take one or two very quick questions, sir. One question is from Tanmay, and he's asking, does any action can be taken against the police who had refused to register the FIR? What are the remedies available to the victims?
Well, as far as the CBI investigation is concerned, definitely the CBI will also investigate the role of the local police in the death of Sushant Singh Rajput, and if necessary, they may also charge sheet some of the police personnel, or may even take them into custody at some stage to interrogate them properly. So all that should happen, and again, that is completely in the domain of the Central Bureau of Investigation, of whom it feels may be involved in this case and whom it feels may have, compromised the investigation, and accordingly to charge sheet them or to book them under the various provisions of the IPC.
So one last question, Ashish Mishra is asking, can we compare the present case with Arushi Talwar's case? Is there any similarity or any thing of like nature which you have noticed?
Well, I can only comment that if the family had not intervened, probably the matter would have gone the Arushi Talwar way. I can only say that much and leave it at that.
Pranshul,
thank you so much. Yes, sir.
There is one more question from Monica with regard to, does primary evidence when collected by one investigating agency and handed over to another get compromised?
Well, in this case, there is no primary evidence because whatever the Mumbai police has done as part of an inquest, which is under 174. Now, 174, Supreme Court very clearly says it is not a registration of a case and it's just a preliminary inquiry. So any statement recorded by the Mumbai police can't be a statement under 161 of the CRPC. So really speaking, whatever they would have handed over would be only, the exhibits or the postmortem report or the photograph that they may have taken at the site, etc. Only those. The rest investigation de novo is being done by the CBI and has to be done by the CBI only.
Thank you, sir. We'll take one last question. That is from Gauri Dabas, and she is asking: is there any rule that in suicide cases, unless the forensic department arrives and take note of the crime scene, the police cannot intervene?
So there is no hard and fast rule in suicide cases, but the common practice that is followed is that before taking a call on suicide, you have to wait for the forensic report to come. And in this case, the Mumbai police had declared it to be suicide even before the forensic report came. So that is something which is very unusual. It should not come prior. It should not come prior to that. The declaration as to whether it is suicide or not. So if you declare somebody suicide and later on the forensic you find poison in his system, then it will be you look very foolish to make a statement of that kind. So that is something which is completely unacceptable.
Thank you, sir. This is all from Q&A section. And now I would like to request Major General P.K. Sharma, sir, Professor and Director, Amity Law School, Dean Faculty of Law, to propose vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pranshul, and thank you, Neha, for this wonderful session. Vikas, sir, it is always a treat to hear you, and the number of attendees just keep mounting till the lecture, till your session is on. We are very, very grateful to you. I know I have been pestering you for last so many days to come and speak to us on this important topic. The idea definitely was not to know about a particular case, but the issue that crept up was very important, particularly for the students who will be going and practicing in the criminal justice system. And nobody better than you, sir, to have come and enlightened us. We are extremely grateful. And definitely, this is not the end of it, sir. We will keep bothering you. And now that you have a penchant for speaking to students and sharing your knowledge with them, we will definitely come to you, seek your time, and have more such fruitful sessions with you. Thank you very much for sparing your time, sir. And all the participants, all the coordinators, and all the faculty members who have attended. And I find not only from the Amity Law School, there are people from outside also. Our own CRC Ankur Gupta was there. So that shows the interest this topic and particularly you generate. So very grateful to all of you.
Our DSW, Major General GS Bal, sir, he also
oh yes,
from the beginning he is with us, sir.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So grateful, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with students and to share my experience.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.